Imagine you're walking down a street in the heart of Rome, 1600 years ago. The city is alive with the sounds of bustling markets, the chatter of people, and the clatter of chariots. But there's an eerie tension in the air. The once mighty Roman Empire is on the brink of collapse, and a new faith is spreading like wildfire through the streets. This faith, Christianity, is about to change the world in ways that no one could have predicted. But the story of how it rose to power is far from simple. It's a tale of conflict, transformation, and the blending of old and new beliefs. So, buckle up, because we're about to dive into a journey that will take us from the catacombs of Rome to the halls of power, and everything in between. When Jesus Christ was crucified around the year 30 AD, his followers were a small, persecuted group. They were scattered, hiding in the shadows, and struggling to keep their faith alive. The Roman Empire at the time was a vast and powerful entity, and its rulers saw Christianity as a threat to their control. Persecutions were common, and many early Christians met their end in brutal ways, often being thrown to lions in the Colosseum or burned at the stake. But things began to change in the early 4th century when Emperor Constantine had a vision. He saw a cross in the sky and heard the words, "By this sign conquer." Constantine, who was seeking a way to unify his empire, decided to embrace Christianity. In 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan, which granted religious tolerance to Christians. This was a huge turning point. Suddenly, Christianity was not just tolerated, but also favored by the state. Over the next few decades, it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. However, converting the empire was no easy task. The Roman world was a melting pot of cultures and religions. Paganism, with its many gods and goddesses, was deeply ingrained in the daily lives of people. The Romans had gods for almost everything from love and war to the harvest and the sea. These beliefs were not just religious, they were part of their identity. When Christianity came along, it didn't just challenge their religious practices, it challenged their entire way of life. Despite the official support, the spread of Christianity was slow and often met with resistance. Many people, especially in the rural areas and among the barbarian tribes, clung to their old beliefs. The conversion of the Germans, Celts, and Slavs, for example, didn't really gain momentum until around 500 AD, about 200 years after Constantine's edict. Even then, the conversions were often superficial. Many new Christians continued to practice their old pagan rituals in secret, blending them with Christian practices. This blending of old and new beliefs wasn't just a matter of stubbornness, it was a natural process of cultural evolution. The early church leaders, recognizing this, often allowed some pagan practices to continue, but under a Christian guise. For example, many pagan festivals were transformed into Christian holidays. The winter solstice, which was celebrated by many cultures as a time of rebirth, became Christmas, the celebration of Christ's birth. This strategy helped to ease the transition and make Christianity more appealing to the masses. But the early church wasn't just about converts and cultural changes. It was also a time of intense internal debates and conflicts. One of the most significant was the Arian controversy. Arianism, named after Arius, a priest from Alexandria, argued that Jesus was not equal to God the Father, but was instead a created being. This belief was seen as heretical by many church leaders, who insisted on the divinity of Christ. The debate raged for decades and led to the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where the Nicene Creed was formulated to define the Orthodox belief in the Trinity. The early church was also marked by a deep suspicion of reason and intellect. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, one of the most influential figures of the 12th century, famously declared that the pursuit of knowledge, unless driven by a holy mission, was a pagan act and therefore vile. This distrust of reason was not unique to Bernard. Many early church leaders believed that faith, not reason, was the path to truth. They saw the pagan philosophers, with their emphasis on logic and rational thought, as a threat to the spiritual purity of the church. Despite this, the early church was not entirely averse to borrowing from pagan traditions. When Pope Gregory I named the 7 cardinal virtues in the 6th century, he included 4 virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, that were directly adopted from the pagan philosophers Plato and Pythagoras. This shows that even as the Church sought to distance itself from paganism, it couldn't completely avoid its influence. The story of Christianity's rise to power is also a story of violence and persecution. The early Christians, who had once been the victims of persecution, now found themselves in a position of power. Some, driven by a desire for vengeance, turned the tables on the pagans. Temples were destroyed, pagan properties were confiscated, and those who refused to convert were subjected to the same brutal treatments that Christians had once endured. This violence seems at odds with the teachings of Jesus, who preached love and forgiveness. But the reality of human nature is complex, and the desire for retribution is a powerful force. One of the most significant figures in this period was Saint Augustine, the Bishop of Hippo. Augustine's life was a study in transformation. Born in 354 AD in North Africa, he was raised in a Christian household, but spent his youth indulging in all the pleasures of the flesh. He had a son out of wedlock and was deeply involved in the Manichaean faith, a religion that combined elements of Christianity and Zoroastrianism. But in 386 AD, at the age of 32, he had a profound conversion experience and dedicated his life to Christianity. Augustine's most famous work, The City of God, was written in response to the sack of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 AD. Many people, including some Christians, blamed the fall of Rome on the abandonment of the old pagan gods. Augustine, however, argued that Rome's fall was a punishment for its sins, not its new faith. He divided the world into two cities, the city of God, which represented the faithful, and the city of earth, which represented the sinners. This concept became a cornerstone of medieval Christian thought, and had far-reaching implications for the relationship between the Church and the state. Augustine's ideas on original sin and the role of women in society were also influential. He believed that all humans were inherently sinful because of Adam's fall in the Garden of Eden. This sin, he argued, was passed down through sexual reproduction, making sex itself a source of corruption. However, he also believed that women, through the intercession of the Virgin Mary, could play a crucial role in salvation. This idea, that women could be both the source of sin and the means of redemption, had a profound impact on medieval Christian attitudes toward gender. The rise of Christianity also brought about significant changes in the role of women in society. In the pagan world, women often had more freedoms and were sometimes even revered as goddesses. Christianity, with its emphasis on purity and chastity, often restricted women's roles to the domestic sphere. However, it also offered new opportunities for women to play important roles in the Church. Many women became nuns, and some, like St. Bridget of Kildare, founded their own religious communities. These women were often seen as models of piety and devotion, and their influence helped to shape Christian society. As Christianity spread, it also faced new challenges. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD marked the beginning of the Middle Ages, a period of political fragmentation and social upheaval. In this new world, the Church often filled the power vacuum left by the collapse of the Roman state. Bishops and abbots became important figures in local governance, and the Church's influence extended into every aspect of life. The concept of theocracy, where the Church and the state were intertwined, became a reality in many parts of Europe. The Middle Ages were a time of great creativity and intellectual ferment. Monasteries became centers of learning, preserving and copying ancient texts. The Church also played a crucial role in the development of art and architecture, commissioning grand cathedrals and illuminated manuscripts. The Gothic cathedrals, with their towering spires and intricate stained glass, were symbols of the Church's power and influence. However, the Church's power also brought its own set of problems. The struggle between the Church and secular rulers over the control of land and power led to conflicts that would shape European history for centuries. The investiture controversy, for example, was a conflict between the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope over who had the right to appoint bishops. This struggle, which lasted from the 11th to the 12th century, highlighted the tensions between spiritual and temporal authority. The Middle Ages also saw the rise of the Crusades, a series of religious wars aimed at reclaiming the Holy Land from Muslim rule. These wars, which began in 1095 and lasted for nearly 200 years, had a profound impact on European society. They brought Europeans into contact with the Islamic world, leading to the exchange of ideas and technologies. The Crusades also had a dark side, marked by violence and the exploitation of the conquered lands. As the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance, the Church faced new challenges. The rediscovery of ancient Greek and Roman texts led to a renewed interest in humanism, a philosophical movement that emphasized the value of human beings and the importance of reason. The Renaissance also saw the rise of the printing press, which made it easier for people to access information and ideas. This led to a questioning of traditional authority, including the authority of the Church. The Reformation, which began in the 16th century, was a direct challenge to the power of the Church. Led by figures like Martin Luther and John Calvin, the Reformation sought to reform the Church and return it to what they saw as its original, pure form. This led to the creation of Protestant churches and a split in Christendom that has lasted to this day. In conclusion, the rise of Christianity in the early centuries of the Roman Empire is a complex and multifaceted story. It is a story of conflict and transformation, of the blending of old and new beliefs, and of the profound impact that this new faith had on the world. From the catacombs of Rome to the grand cathedrals of the Middle Ages, Christianity has shaped the course of history in ways that are still felt today. As we look back on this journey, we see that the path to power is rarely straightforward, and that the legacy of the past continues to influence the present.